Hi folks, this is Dr. Burke with Pathways Integrative Health. I'm here today talking with you about the top 10 thyroid health and wellness related tests you can run for yourself. Because in my office, I see so many complaints people experience that can be related back to thyroid function. Because remember, every single cell in your body is dependent on the thyroid hormones to turn cells on to do their job. So common complaints that I see, and by the way, according to statistics, thyroid-related complaints are present in about 90% of women and men who present to the doctor's office. So common things I see, weight gain. They could be doing all the right things, doing the right exercise, eating the right diet, and just people, weight is coming on or it's not coming off. They're doing all the right stuff, just things aren't changing. It can be sleep problems. It's difficulty getting to sleep. It's waking up in the morning, trying to drag yourself out of bed, which leads to the most common thing I see in my intake forms, which is fatigue. It can be the hot flashes. It can be the cold hands, the cold feet. It can be depression, anxiety, and brain fog, and those changes, those cognitive changes that are so very concerning in our current society and are skyrocketing through the roof right now. We're seeing them all over the place with people. It's the depression, the anxiety kind of falls in the same category of cognitive changes. It's the thinning of the hair. It's the infertility. It's digestive problems, constipation, gassy, bloaty, just things aren't working so good in that area. It's the chronic aches and pains. It's the chronic frequent illnesses. And what I see so much is that people are getting fed up. They're looking for answers, but they're not getting the right answers to their questions. So commonly they'll go into their doctor and they have some common tests done. Common tests that are run. What are the common tests people get? Most commonly, they'll run a thyroid test, they'll do a TSH and a free T4, maybe. I'm going to talk about more of those as we go along here. So how it all works, by the way, we just want to start to tie this together. We look really simply. I have other videos that go really in depth of how the thyroid works. I'm just going to cover some real basics. So the pituitary gland talks to the thyroid gland by way of a hormone called TSH. When the pituitary gland senses that the thyroid needs to be more active, it kicks out a hormone called TSH to make the thyroid work more. But you might have gone into your doctor, had your TSH test, and it told you your labs are normal. Because by the way, the only thing most commonly run is a TSH. Maybe that free T4, and they say, hey, you're normal. And as it says, what is this normal you speak of? It's not normal. It's not how you should be. So here's one of the key problems. We need to understand that tests are useful. We want to look at what tests are useful and compare them to what's normal. We also want to look at how we look at our tests. Most lab ranges are inaccurate. They don't tell us the right story. And I like to use an analogy. When you look at lab results, imagine that you're driving down a road and somebody puts a blindfold on you. Pretty soon you wind up in the ditch or off the road. But imagine that you've got a blindfold on, but they've also put rumble strips on the side of the road and a guardrail to let you know when you're hitting the edge of the road. So you're driving down the road, got your blindfold on, and you hear the rumble strip, so you know you got to move away from it. You're in the center of stuff. In the medical world, there's no rumble strips. There's no guardrails. They only look at you when you've fallen off the road into the ditch. We're going to talk more about that in a couple minutes. So when we look at lab values, we call bell curves are used. Bell curve is in the middle. The average is the most common person. Then out here are some people and some other people's. In the middle is what they consider the normal range. But here's the real problem. When we're looking at lab values, what happens in the different lab companies around the country is every couple of years, they compile all their data together, find the average, create the range. But here's the key problem. Who are they looking at? Not the healthy people. Who are looking at people who come in the door who aren't feeling well, who aren't healthy. So they're basing all their data off of an unhealthy population. And what we've seen over the past 20 or 30 years is these normal ranges have gotten broader and broader and broader. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. So this is why your lab values are normal, but you still don't feel good. You go into your doctor and say, Doc, I don't feel good. And they tell you, you are normal. How does it make you feel? Probably not real good. Probably kind of confused. Probably kind of wondering what's wrong with you. See, when we look, but in a functional medicine practice, we look at functional lab values. These are lab ranges that are much more sensitive. So we start to look and they start to reveal the problems. We look at patterns. We look at where things are out of balance and start to look at where things aren't working the way they should be. Or another analogy, I know I use the driving on the road analogy. It's kind of like if you look at a lab value, in fact, I think they're next. Here we go, a little slow to load there, sorry folks. I have a very fancy slide here. Did not know that. So here's some values. So in the middle, these are the green range, the normal, ideal, perfect health. Imagine you got a bullseye. You got an archery target. The bullseye is perfect, ideal health. Missing the target completely, that's the reds. That's considered medically abnormal. Now these orange ranges here, this is where things aren't what they should be. We call functional imbalances. So it's kind of like imagining that you are looking at something and you're looking at where things are wrong and where things are balanced. But here's the issue I'm trying to make here. Say you have a lab value of something where you are outside the functional ranges, you're not healthy, but you haven't hit the disease range. But then you walk in the next month, they run a test on you. Oh, by the way, now you're sick. Now you have a problem. Well, what about back here? What about when you're feeling tired and fatigued and digestive problems and brain fog and not ideally healthy? Things didn't change when you went from here to here. Things were already developing in these ranges, and that's where the important parts to look at. So how it all works. So back to my thyroid diagram. We're going to look briefly at TSH. The pituitary talks to your thyroid, tells your thyroid, hey, we don't have enough thyroid hormone. Turn things on, make things work. So normal lab values for TSH, 0.5 to 5.5. That's a really big range. Now optimal, 0.35 to 2. So you could be just borderline at the very edge of the medical normals. You are okay, but you're not healthy. You're not optimally functioning. That's a really important thing to look at. So what tests really need to be checked? And by the way, we want to look at a couple different factors here. We want to look at what's the right test to run and how do you think about the tests when you run them. Are you looking at them from medical values or standard lab values? Or are you looking at functional values? Very different questions and different things to look at. So you want to look at bare minimally, this is a standard approach to thyroid disorders. We're looking at TSH and a free T4. Very small part of the equation. But you need things like free T3. This T3, that's the metabolically active part that makes things work. I also want to look at total T4 and total T3. We start to get deeper into how all the different parts of the thyroid interact with each other and how they work. We want to look at, once again, how it all works. We're back to my diagram. And just as a quick review, I have other videos of how the thyroid works. I'm going to cover it really briefly. Brain talks to your thyroid, tells your thyroid how to work, tells your thyroid to make more thyroid hormone. It kicks out about 93% T4. That is inactive. More about that later. T3, about 7%, that's the active part. That's a part that binds to a protein called TBG, which is kind of like a taxi cab, goes out to the cells, turns the cells on, makes them work. Every metabolically active cell in your body relies on thyroid hormone. And if the thyroid hormone, the T3, can't either make it to the cell to turn the cell on or make it into the cell, things don't work. I'm going to expand more about that later on. So then also too, remember that about 60% of that thyroid hormone is converted from T4 to T3 in your liver and about 20% in your gut and some other parts we're not going to talk about here in this video, but it's going to touch on them real briefly. But that goes out to the cell, turns the cell on, makes the cell work. Here's an analogy I really like. Imagine that you've got a factory. That factory's kicking out keys. It's making red keys, that's T4. It's making blue keys, that's T3. So when he pulls up on the truck, that truck is the TBG. That's what we call thyroid binding globulin. Picks up the blue key, hops, that's that 7%, that T3, drives across town, gets to a factory, the cell, and then gets out of the truck, grabs the key, walks into the cell, or walks in the factory, goes over to the control panel, your DNA, sticks the key into a receptor, turns that cell on, turns that factory on, makes that cell do something. That's thyroid function in a nutshell. Every single cell in your body needs good proper T3 levels. That relies on both production, your thyroid. That relies on conversion of T4 to T3 in your liver. 60% happens there. 20% in your gut. And then those are areas are commonly stressed and strained in our society, in our culture. So here it is again. Just kind of have to hammer the point home here, folks. T4 gets converted, which is inactive, gets converted to T3, which is the active form. About 80% happens in the liver and the gut. Two areas that are really stressed in people. Almost all my patients have poor gut function, poor digestion. Almost all of us, because of our environment and our culture, our society, have poor function, slow function liver activity. So quality questions. Listen, somebody really admire Anthony Robbins says, if you don't like your outcome, ask new questions. It's the quality of your questions determines the quality of your life. So questions we ask, things we look into is how is the liver working? How's the gut working? This is through lab work. Standard lab work, but looking at it from a very different point of view. We look at liver function, gut function, inflammatory markers, blood sugar, blood chemistry, immune markers, and this here is onward and onward. Depends on what we're looking for, depends on how deep we need to go. And this is one of my favorite slides. I literally could do a whole night's workshop on this. This is called the web of physiologic dysfunction. It's kind of hard to come out on the slide here, but you see here's a person's problem. Here, example, we have thyroid dysfunction. And out here we have all the common organ systems and body systems. Blood sugar, adrenals, gut, thyroid, the hormones, liver dysfunction, immune system imbalance, brain function, cell dysfunction, mind-body stress. All of those come into play leading to a person's problem. If you come to my door, I don't care what you have. If it's back pain, carpal tunnel, headache, migraine headaches, or poor functioning thyroid health. We start to look at this web. How is it all interconnected? We start asking different questions. What's the connectiveness of things? We start to get new results. So further labs, we do T3 uptake, free T-thyroxine uptake. I'm not going to go a lot into those right now because they're kind of small parts of the equation, but they're important. But the big one is reverse T3. This is that extra 20%. I said that 60% gets converted in the liver, 20% in the gut. This 20% is kind of the extra part. This is what we call reverse T3. This is like the brakes. This slows things down. So here's what it looks like. Stress produces reverse T3. When I talk about stress, it can be lots of different things. It can be the mental, emotional, the chemical stress, mental, emotional stress we experience from trying to survive in our crazy society. It could be the chemical stresses from going outside and taking a deep breath of our air. I mean, you go outside, we take a deep breath right now in our culture. We inhale more toxins than our great grandparents did their entire lives. Just pause and think about that, the impact that has in our body. I thought I read someplace recently it's 90 billion pounds of chemicals are pumped in the environment each year, and we only know less than 10% of those chemicals do, and those 10% are not good. We're living in a whole big, huge experiment that we don't know what the outcome is going to be, but it doesn't look real good. So, but stress produces reverse T3. Reverse T3 blocks the thyroid, the T3 receptors at the cells. So what that means is, imagine, kind of coming back to the analogy of the factory. The guy comes driving across town, he's got the truck, he's got the blue key in his hand, comes up to the factory door and it's locked. You can't get in. That is blocked T3 receptors, so he can't turn the cell on. So it creates what we call a reverse T3 dominance, where if elevated stress is happening, the cells don't respond to thyroid hormone, and the reverse T3 blocks the activity of your thyroid hormone. So once again, stress. All sorts of stresses here. It's lots of mental emotional stressors, but it can be chemicals, it can be toxicity, it can be heavy metals, it can be, you name it. So whatever it is that our physiology has to respond to, that's a stressor. Stress isn't good or bad. Stress just is. The problem is when it's chronic and it's ongoing and we don't get the recovery time to recover from it, or we don't have the proper fuel and the building blocks to rebuild to deal with it. So T4 is blocked by stress, so we don't get the active T3. Then we shunt over to what we call reverse T3. That's actually really important. We actually need that. So just imagine you're under stress. Say you're sick. Whatever, when you have the flu, what happens? Your energy goes down. You're under stress from a virus. You have an immune stress. You create more reverse T3, so less T3. Your body slows down. It makes you do that for a reason, so you can heal, so you can recover. It's actually a brilliant mechanism. But the problem is we live in a world full of stressors. Sometimes real, sometimes things that we perceive that are stressors that we make up. But what happens then is that reverse T3 slows our body down. Slowed down body, fatigue, it's tired. It's a normal mechanism, a normal situation, but it's pathological because it's prolonged. That's not what it should be. Other things we need to look at, other important tests. Thyroid peroxidase and thyroglobulin antibodies. Thyroid peroxidase, or TPO, that is the enzyme inside your thyroid glands responsible for the formation of thyroid hormone. And thyroglobulin antibodies, or thyroglobulin, that is the taxi cab that carries the thyroid hormone around your body. What happens with antibodies, it means your immune system is attacking them. It's stressed out, it's attacking your thyroid. Oops, here's a diagram. So here's our parts. So TPO, inside the thyroid gland, helps the formation. TBG, that's the transport mechanism. And when you have antibodies, it means that you have an immune problem. You have autoimmunity to those particular proteins. That's a really, really big deal. In fact, we see clinically that 90% of people with poor thyroid health and poor energy, or like hypothyroid symptoms, they have an underlying autoimmune condition where their immune system is attacking their thyroid or attacking the transport molecules, so your cells don't receive the T3 hormones. So thyroid wellness testing. So you got to look at it really simply. You can do TSH and free T4. That's a small part of the equation. Catches a really small part of the picture. Or we look at TSH, free T4, free T3, total T4, total T3, T3 uptake, free thyroxine index, reverse T3, TPO antibodies, TBG antibodies, and onward. Because we have to look at things like a liver panel. I put this picture of somebody looking under a rock. My motto is we leave no stone unturned. We have to look under lots of different things. We need to look at liver function, kidney function, blood chemistries, inflammatory markers, blood sugars, adrenal function, immune function, to see what is happening to a person's health that's showing up as some symptoms. One of my early mentors drilled a really important statement in my head. It says, what your patient's complaining of is not their problem. It's where their problems ended up. Stop caring about their symptoms. I do care how a person feels, but that's important. But the more important question to ask is, why are they feeling that way? So this is a little bit about the cell. So T3 comes in, binds to that cell membrane, crosses over to the cell membrane, goes into the cell nucleus, turns your DNA on to make your cell do something. When that's blocked, when that's not happening, now your cells don't get activated. A big thing that makes that happen also too, lots of different things by the way, but one thing we talk about here is inflammation. The red means inflammation. Inflammation is like if you hit yourself on the arm with a hammer. I don't recommend that. You get swollen, you get red, you get inflamed, you get pain. That's inflammation. That's normal. The problem is what we call meta-inflammation, when your whole body, all your metabolism gets inflamed. It takes a lot of energy to be inflamed. It makes all your joints and your muscles hurt. It makes your brain not work. It stresses your immune system. It causes a whole lot of problems, and it blocks T3 at the level of your cells, so that T3 can't get into the new cell nucleus to turn that cell on to work. So that's just a brief overview of things. I literally could do an hour workshop on this, but I hope that gives you some good information. You know, if you want to learn more about what we do in our office, feel free to reach out to us. You can reach us at our office, 763-634-5892. You can reach me by email, drmays@askdrmays.com. I always offer a free courtesy consultation to see, are we a match for each other? Can I help you? Can we work together? And otherwise, you know, thank you for taking the time to watch this video, and I look forward to speaking to you soon. Thanks a lot. Bye.